When I was a kid, everyone lived in the same neighborhoods, knew each other. You knew all that. You could walk around, feel good about it. And you don't see that anymore. And that's kind of like the gist I was getting to. But the Black Lives Matter thing is really good, but it's angry.
Yeah.
But I also said, it'd be great if those same people would from there. And that's the thing that when I look at this, I'm like, it's good to have it, but we got to think of what's the same old things over and over and over. Same old guys make money. They all have the same opportunities, but it's always a little guy always gets the shaft in the long run. And that's why I hope I was, with all the different things that are going on right now, I was hoping that out of this, something good comes out of it that's really good from the inner city neighborhood out. That's kind of what I was giving to you. But, it gets a little bit more deep than that, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Conversation about it. It was via electronic, though. It wasn't a chat. And I don't disagree at all. I'm sure you don't, because you think that we should be responsible for ourselves, right?
Self-governance is always where you always start there. That's where you would start, even though regardless of what's going on outside of your household, if someone to your children, you'll tell them how to self-govern yourself. Even though what's happening may not be their fault, you're still gonna teach that first, the instincts of being able, to talk to what's the problem that's outside of your control. Self-governance is the first way you do that.
Well, I didn't have any problem. I thought it was great, because I especially like the fact that you talked about it should be both.
Right.
It shouldn't just be Black Lives Matter and going out and interrupting Bernie Sanders and Jeb Bush. Right. It should be both.
Right.
Whereas a lot of times the message is, well, why don't you go deal with your neighborhood first? Right.
Right.
And I don't think it should be an either or a prioritization. It should be both and.
Right.
And therein lies the challenge.
Right.
A conversation like that becomes a why don't you just? I call it a why don't you just conversation.
Right.
Mitt Romney was famous for why don't you just?
Right.
And I remember one instance. If you're having a problem finding money for college, just go borrow it from your parents, which was one of the more ignorant ass things I've ever heard before.
Right.
Because he completely missed the point that the parents, in addition to maybe not having the education themselves, didn't have the wherewithal.
Right.
So you're exactly right. You're on point. The thing that I think that you didn't miss, but I think a lot of people miss when they don't acknowledge or give the Black Lives Matter movement its credence, is really the institutional racism that exists. I was over at Darnell's house. You better call Darnell. I was at Darnell's house yesterday, and we were in one of those discussions on his porch. And so I said at one point, I said, listen, the racism that we enjoy now in this country, it's not taught. It's observed. It's learned. It is because you learn to behave towards certain people because of the costume that they wear.
Correct.
And you just do. And so that kind of leads to why the Black Lives Matter is relevant. First off, some people don't like the fact that they interrupted Bernie Sanders. Well, by definition, a protest is supposed to be disruptive.
Exactly.
Right. So if it's anything but that, it's not a protest. Right. In the purest sense of the word.
Right.
Secondly, and probably more importantly, it is, and last time I told a story about same guys graduate from the same college with the same degree, apply for the same job, get the same job, and statistically, the guy with the brown costume is going to make less than the guy without the brown costume, and it begins to snowball from there. So until we begin to account for the lack of opportunity, we always have a problem. So let's say that Rob and I went out and organized a march, and we marched around our community, and we made a dent. How do we then, with people who are saying, okay, we're going to stop shooting, how do you then take those people and account for the disparities in health and economic opportunity and education opportunity? It has to be both in order to be effective.
Correct. Has to be.
Yeah. Let me say
Exactly
this though.
right.
Go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
no, no.
Vince.
It's fine. Go ahead.
Now, what I was gonna say is everyone has their roles. Everyone, I can't expect to play the same role Vince may play. I can't expect to play the same role you may play. Last week, I was on the phone all week calling these different South suburban cities. The police departments. What I'm trying to do is organize a forum, and I really need your help with this, Eric. To be honest with you, I was trying to organize.
I'm lazy, man.
I'm just trying to organize this forum of police officers or the different representatives of the police department from and the south suburbs, Homewood, Glenwood, where we live. So what I want to do is I'm starting this program up that's coming up in September, Basketball and Beyond. The seasonal part of it is coming up, and I want to have a forum to have all of the police officers or representatives from those police departments to interact with all of those community groups in those areas, so the police officers can interact with it's going to be predominantly mostly black teens, so they can it can be an interaction, because we got to address the tension that's going on between police officers. We got to address that, even though I get the bigger point you're making about the economic development that's going to come behind it, but right now we have to address that. That's why everyone's roles,
because then you're prioritizing. It should be both.
Okay, I agree. I agree, but I'm just saying everyone has their role. I can't put as much, energy, or I might not even have the same type of networking that you have on the area you may address.
Right.
But I'm just saying on the level that I can address, I'm doing everything in my power to make sure this forum is created. I'm talking about within the next few months. I want this to happen, because this is not, see, and one of the things you always start running into, I was running into a few conversations with some of the police department. Then you start listening to the political mumbo jumbo that goes on why something as simplistic as that can't help, it can't happen. Because what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to use the budget for my Basketball and Beyond to sponsor it. You see my point?
Right.
Because everybody want to know what good is in it for them. You know what I mean? But we try to avoid the next Sandra Bland. We trying to avoid the next Eric Garner or any other police officers that get shot or that's not being mentioned in all these situations. So I'm just trying to elevate the whole way of thinking on the whole subject.
But my question is, when we talk about police officers and things like that, this is the only things that always bothers me, is that why don't they have police officers that live in the area police those areas? Why is it some people that are so far away from the community have to come in and do that? And I guess, and maybe, why don't they make it easier for those people that live in those communities to become police officers? And that always bothers me, because say you're a gang member, okay, and there's something going on. Don't you think that guy who knows neighborhood is going to have a better chance of talking to that guy versus the guy who has no idea about the neighborhood?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't understand why they do that all the time. Why do
I know what happens. Well, first off, it works in corporate America too.
Right.
So when you lean on corporate America and say, listen, why aren't you hiring diverse hires? Well, we can't find any, ends up being the answer. We know that's BS. That's not the case.
Right.
Here's the deal. You try to hire police in the communities that are heavily policed, you have a hard time finding people that make it through all the screens.
Right.
Right. And the few you do. Here's the thing, I think, though, and it takes someone at in the executive office of government, the mayor, president of the county, or the governor, somebody to do this. The communities should really police their own communities, just like the communities should educate their own children. The teachers and police officers should be there to support the people who police their own communities. So I think that the job of police officers should be to organize community policing.
Okay.
You should get block club members out and train them on how to police your own communities, and then support them.
Now, I agree with that. And you don't necessarily have to be from that community in order to do that. Because when you
do though. No, you're right. You don't.
You don't.
But you have a significant advantage if you can come out your front door and say, "Listen, Rob, stop that."
Yeah.
Versus somebody who's going to go home to wherever.
Right. Well, the problem that I see with that is fraternization. Fraternization occurs when I've been witnessing that for years. Someone from the neighborhood become a police officer, and they're sort of compromised because they know you. They know you. You're gonna get 100 breaks.
But that's not so bad though. All the time. I mean,
not so bad,
because we grew up in neighborhoods. We knew. I mean, I knew all the police officers in our neighborhood. My dad knew them. We all knew them. So Yeah,
you did, because when they saw me, they wondered why I was there.
I know. I remember you said that.
Right.
But then if we got drunk, we're in
Right.
high school, we take a keg down to the beach, get out of here, get up there and get away, and start doing what you have to do. But we weren't like, but if they didn't know who we were, they'd be like, they're going to arrest all of us because they don't know us.
Well, I guess the second part of the point I was making, I agree with what you're saying about them needing to know the community. They need to come in, and you got to find a different strategy to get police officers to know the community,
right?
Regardless of whether they're from there or not. You got to find a different strategy to get them to be intimate with the community, but you don't necessarily have to be from the community to be effective in that way.
No.
Is what I'm saying, because
you don't have to be
the possibility
effective,
of fraternization
right.
is stronger. It has a stronger influence.
I think that's the point, though. I think fraternization is really what we want to start having.
I got you.
Assuming that you create the correct boundaries.
Yeah.
Because you're right, because you could cross the line and let people get away with some garbage, and maybe you become garbage yourself.
That's what you try to avoid.
What's that line? Yeah. What's that line?
Yeah.
Okay, so we started it. It's going on now. Number 773-763-9278. Stay tuned for more at the Family Meeting.
Hi, this is Kurt Summers, City Treasurer for Chicago. You can find me at www.summersforchicago.com. Keep listening to the Family Meeting.
I'm Daryl Dean, the CEO of DNA Credit Card Processing Services. What we do is we set businesses up to accept all forms of payment: Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express. We do that online. We do that with free equipment, whether it's stationary or if it's POS systems, cash registers. We do it all. You can find us on DNA Credit Card Processing Services.com. Any business out there that wants to process credit cards should pick up that phone and call us at 708-890-2895.
Okay, listeners, get ready for the $80,000 question. How much does 1 year in a private nursing home cost today? If you guessed $80,000, you're almost right, according to the Genworth 2012 Cost of Care Survey. In fact, depending on your location, it can be even higher. And while more than 70% of us will need long-term care at some point during our lives, most of us have no idea how we'll pay for it. Agents with the Polaris Insurance Agency can help. Contact the Polaris Insurance Agency for free information that can help you make a plan. Don't outlive your financial resources. Call the Polaris Insurance Agency today at 312-951-2606.
Imagine a job where someone cares about you, your family, and your coworkers, and will sign a contract to that effect. That is what a union actually does for you. We've all heard the bashing, the insults, and hatred directed toward unions by powerful political elites and wealthy business bosses. For more information about your job interests, call SEIU Local 73 and ask for Tim Ball, 312-787-5868. Again, that number is 312-787-5868.
This is Susan Manuel, www.ablconsulting.net. Welcome back to the Family Meeting.
773-763-9278 is the number. That's 773-763-9278. We'd love to hear from you. So I guess we were off into talking about community policing now. Is that where we're headed? Is that the gist of what you were headed to?
Well, overall, but economic development within each community too, as well.
Yeah. So I got a friend of mine who owns grocery stores. I shouldn't even reference him in this deal, but so the challenge is the system. So back to my scenario. Let's try it this way. Back to my scenario again. Let's say that Rob and I go out and you too, Vince, and we shake everybody up, and it's like, you're right. We're gonna stop all this crazy stuff. We're gonna do something right. We want to go start some businesses in our community, educate our children. So where does one start? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, really, where do you start?
Yeah.
So, okay, I want to open a grocery store in my neighborhood now. My credit is jacked up, though.
Right.
I can't get a lease. And then I know from dealing with people who are in a grocery business that, they're going to give out all the food in the front of the warehouse first.
Right.
And the food in the warehouse to turn brown. That's going to go to the stores in my neighborhood now. I know this. That's what happens. I know that that to the extent I can get terms on the food I'm buying, that is, I can get them to give it to me on credit.
Right.
That my terms are not, then you got that problem.
Right.
I don't know what to do about that. Add to that, the schools that I have to send my children to, I'm going to be involved. I'm going to go to school with them, I'm gonna go to PTO meetings, but I'll be damned, the building's raggedy as hell.
Right.
We playing basketball in the damn cafeteria,
Right.
Right.
and we don't have the resources as a community to do something about that. So we're going to go to a bank now, but not so much. You can't, not so much. So you end up getting trapped. And so when someone like me or Rob or anybody like me tells that story, then we're being a victim all of a sudden.
Right.
Sometimes it's just reality.
Right.
So what do we do about that? How do you start that? If you change everybody's mind and they're going to behave now, where do you start?
Well, what's funny is when we talking about different businesses, we talking about small businesses.
Yeah, small businesses.
Like
but
Subway.
relegated to staples of the community. You need grocery stores, you need
Right.
gas stations, the things you need in the community to make it a community.
But just say like businesses we sort of overlook. Like I really at 42 years old, it just dawned on me like a business that we've really been overlooking. Like, the little hotels that be in your area, the ones that they
Motel
rent out.
6 or
Yeah.
like a La Quinta, something
Well,
like that.
no,
Yeah.
I'm talking about even lower budget than that. The ones that they rent out for a week, rent a room out for a week.
Yeah.
Those are owned by someone.
Of course they are.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
most of them appear to be Indians. I mean, most of these hotels that you can go get a room for a week for
Right.
$195 a week or something like that.
Right.
Right.
You never thought about that business as a business standpoint, but now when you're looking, how do we do that? It was an interesting conversation I was having the other day about Ann Arbor, about something this thrift store does in Ann Arbor. The thrift store, it invests, it takes part of the money that it receives, it puts it all back into the school. It puts it back into the school system, in the Ann Arbor school system. I'm talking, a business that make close to $1 million annually.
Right.
And they're pouring so much back into the schools to make sure the schools are up to par. Those are the type of things that really need to be, duplicated, in these type of communities.
But go back to your point, you say, the guy who's got the jacked up credit, but why is the person who comes from another country, they have no credit at all? They have the opportunities to get those type of, loans that are lower interest loans. They can go into community and they can start building up their own wealth. Shouldn't that person who lives in that community, even though they have an issue, they say the guy's 23, 24 years old, he doesn't have a lot of credit, but how can an immigrant who's maybe 30, 35 come with his family then do that?
It's a different culture. First off, it's different culture. So first off, their family pools resources, and that same business sends resources back to where they came from. There's no back to where they came from for that brother from the neighborhood.
Right, exactly. Unless it's unless it's within the neighborhood, though.
Right.
Maybe he wants to put it within the neighborhood, but the immigrant is taking that money and they send it back to his family. But it's not going back into the community. You know what I'm saying? So he's taking from the community.
He's carpetbagging,
and he's not giving back into the community. And I think that's part of what I said before. That's not fair. That's where we talked about what happened to those types of loans. You could do that nowadays, so you can do that for that community, for that family, to help them build up their own wealth within the community. And then there's people prospering from that.
There's a lot of garbage that goes around that. If I were to pick somebody out of the community that I thought had the sense to open a business, a grocery store, I'm gonna use that as an example. There's so many different dynamics that go into that business surviving or not surviving. I remember, and this was a number of years ago, and it was a congressman who led a march. Now, Jewel was going to close a grocery store on the west side, deep in the hood, right? And this congressman was marching around protesting Jewel closing a store. And behind him, when he did the press conference, behind him, you could see Mr. Johnson or Mr. Jones grocery store. You could see it behind him as he was railing on Jewel for closing that store. Like, hold on, you know what I'm headed?
Yeah.
The hell with Jewel.
Right.
Go
exactly.
to Mr. Jones.
Yeah. Go.
Right.
Yeah. Go promote Mr. Jones.
Right.
Promote his grocery store community. Who
Mhm.
cares if Jewel's closing? Well, let's go help this guy out.
Right.
Because he's in the community.
So bring the conversation full circle. They did go down there and talk to Mr. Jones or Johnson, whatever his name was.
Right.
And he said, listen, I've been here for 30 years. My
Mhm.
family's from this neighborhood. I wish they just come to me.
I want to ask you a question though. Let me ask you a personal question. You know, it'll have to be black to black. I mean, we're doing it in front of a whole nation full of different people. But do you think that there's something wrong in the black community? Black community that's always making us have this conversation about what we need to do to lift the black community. I'm just saying.
Psychosis.
Yeah,
It's a psychosis.
That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Like, how would you describe it for you as a black man, for you personally? How would you describe what you think is wrong? Because it's a thin line for us as blacks to describe, you know, what we see is wrong, because it almost justifies some of the, you know, overreaction that comes from the white community. But there's some truth to some of the things that we see. I mean, how would you describe it to keep it, you know, I guess?
I got a good analogy for you too. There was a movie. What's that comedian's name that overacts all the time? Used to be on In Living Color.
Jim Carrey?
Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey. So
Okay.
he was in the movie. I think it was called Liar Liar.
Yeah.
Movie.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And he was in the bathroom, and he was kicking his own ass. Remember that? And somebody walked in and said, "Man, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm kicking my own ass." Funniest line in the movie.
He was.
Okay, that's what black folks do to each other, to ourselves. We mess around
Right.
and kick our own asses on a regular basis. So, you know, sorry. Sorry. That's what we do. We do that on a regular basis. And it's a psychosis that's, I almost want to say it's kind of bred into us. It's a defeatist mentality. I think collectively that too many among us have. I watch, for instance, organizations like the Urban League, NAACP, all those organizations that have national conferences on a regular basis. And they're always all year long talking about doing business with black people and circulating the money in the black community and helping us build our economic wealth. And then they have to mess around and have these damn conferences at hotels owned by white folks.
Right.
And so the one they had, I think the Urban League was in Florida this week. Maybe it was the NAACP. In Orlando, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Y'all correct me if I'm wrong. But I know there's 2 black-owned hotels in Florida. And just go there.
Right.
Right. Circulate the money.
Right.
Okay. So what happens when you do that? Well, you're discriminating. You reverse discrimination.
No, that's ridiculous to think that
You
way.
know how it comes.
That's what Polish people do. That's what Hispanics people do.
Thank
That's what
you.
the Koreans do. That's what the Chinese do. The Japanese people do. They all take care of each other.
And that's how they
And then
build
if
their
you do
business.
it, then exactly, that's how they keep the wealth within their own communities.
Right.
And that's the thing that was driving me nuts. I'm like thinking, when I was a kid and I used to go in neighborhoods with my father was selling carpeting and upholstery covers and drapery. I go in some of the worst black neighborhoods with my dad in Chicago. And I'd sit there and I'd be talking to the other kids in the room. My dad was selling the mom and dad the upholstery covers. Or there'd be I swear to God, it's a true story. There'd be a pimp and there'd be a couple girls in front of her and I'm dancing with them. And that would always happen. But
What?
how
old were you?
I was like 9 and 10 years old with my dad.
Hold on a second. You 9 years old dancing with a pimp?
Oh yeah, I was. I swear to God, I'm not kidding you.
That's
my
sounds
favorite
like some
story of all
child
time.
abuse or something, man.
But he was selling. I was like a little closing tool. Okay, whatever. But still,
Can you imagine that? Your daddy take you over to dance with a pimp?
that's where I learned. All the guys were from my dad. That's where I learned how to dance.
Was your dad nervous or something?
No, never.
Hey, Vince, listen. While I'm making the sale, go out there and dance with the pimp for a little while.
You know, it
Okay.
always happened. But again, I was always in those
He had
neighborhoods.
been dancing
but
with
I
Juicy
saw-
too. He had been dancing with Juicy.
But I saw this when I was a kid, and these guys knew my dad. I go in these neighborhoods, and I'm thinking, what happened?
This is really making you one of the best white people I've ever met. This is easily making you are one of the best white people I've ever heard speak.
Out there dancing with Juicy on the corner.
Yeah. But that's good though. I mean, that's good though. But
But again, it
I
goes
don't know
back
what
to
to
my
say about
original
that,
point.
man. I'm kind of lost in
I'm
that
so
one,
lost.
man.
But again, it's how you're brought up.
Right.
You know,
Oh my God.
that's
You know
the
what?
biggest thing.
You know what, Vince, man? I'll be down, man. Let me get Ken on the phone, man. 'Cause there's something crazy about what you just said, man. Hey, Ken, what's up, man? Hey, Ken. Uh-oh, gotta hit the phone line, don't I? Hey, Ken.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sure can. How you doing, man?
Yeah.
Hey, listen, you got one in on
I'm
me
not
last week,
sure
man. Be
about,
careful this
you know,
week, all
Cook
right?
County in Chicago, but they passed a law about between 15 and 20 years ago. The FOP got it pushed through the legislature that allowed the cops to live outside of the cities that they worked in. See, prior to that, the city could require, and the city of Decatur that I lived in required the police to live in the city that, you know, they worked in. And, you know, I mean, all the cops lived in town. Now, they lived in their own little section of town that was, you know, down in South Shores and pretty safe. But, you know, they had to live in Decatur. And then, of course, after the law, you know, was passed, they all bailed out into the county, you know. And and that's the way it is in 101 counties. I don't know what the situation is in Cook County, because they pass a lot of these laws that you know, say in counties over 3 million it's this, and in counties under 3 million it's that, and they even classify cities. So it could be Chicago could be different than Berwyn. You know, I mean, it's the
Well,
way
I think you'd agree, though, that it normally is the lack of ability or effort to find local police officers that is the problem.
No, I think the problem is the cops don't have to live in the cities they police, so you're never going to have community policing when the cops can, you know, be suburban commandos that, you know, come in to, you know, kick black and brown ass, you know, every day, you know?
Mhm.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, it's an interesting point. I think the big problem is that the local police don't recruit in the local neighborhood.
No.
Mhm.
And they take who comes to apply.
So
And-
y'all,
Right.
so both of y'all, it sound like an agreement that, you know, some of the police officers need to come from those communities more.
Hell, I
would
think
think
at least
so.
the police chief needs to be there.
Absolutely. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even the commander in local neighborhoods, the police commander should be from that neighborhood.
Mm.
Yeah, if you're going to be in charge, at least you need to be from the neighborhood, the community.
Well, we don't need no examples like Ford Heights, because most of so much corruption. You know, I've just been studying on
I'm
Ford
sure
Heights
they're happy to hear
lately.
you say that too. I'm sure they're happy to hear you say that.
Huh?
I'm sure they're happy to hear you say
Well,
that.
I mean, it is what it is. It's not. I didn't make corruption up for them.
Are they from Fort Heights, the police officers? in
Some of
Fort
them, well, they don't have a police department now because of the corruption. The Cook County have taken the sheriff's department taken over